Just one day after President Biden announced he will not seek re-election, the spotlight shines even brighter on Vice President Kamala Harris. The vice president is working to secure the Democratic Party's nomination for president, with the national convention now less than a month away.
Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office.
Several leading Democrats have stepped forward to endorse Harris's candidacy, and the political donations are already rolling in. Vice President Harris received at least $46.7 million from small dollar donors on Sunday. That brings the 24-hour total to more than $81 million. The online platform for Democratic fundraising, Act Blue, said in part that yesterday was the biggest fundraising day of 2024. The platform raised more than $27.5 million in the first 5 hours of the vice president's campaign. Since President Joe Biden stepped away from the race, endorsing Harris, she has earned other endorsements from key Democratic leaders. The AP reports she's also now backed by more than half of the Democratic delegates needed to win that nomination.
Developing tonight, will the change in the Democratic nominee for president have any impact on races here in Washington state? KOMO's Jeremy Harris live this evening with a look at how Washington candidates and voters are reacting to the news. Jeremy?
Yeah, Preston, today I talked with Bob Ferguson, who's running for governor here in Washington as a Democrat. He says he was with a group of voters when the news broke that Biden is stepping aside in the race. He said he thinks the president made the right call. As the Democrats move closer to their national convention, Kamala Harris continues to pick up key endorsements from Democratic leaders, putting her closer to the party's nomination.
But I think one thing that it's not too soon to tell is this has really energized Democrats in ways that we haven't seen in a very long time, certainly since before the debate performance itself.
James Long is a political science professor at the University of Washington.
I think within a couple days, we're going to know whether or not it's just Kamala or whether there might be somebody to oppose her.
But for now, Harris seems to have the race to herself.
But yeah, like I said, thus far, it's been kind of surprising that really nobody's thrown their hat in the ring besides her.
Do you think there will be any fracture to that, or do you see a unified march towards her being the candidate at the convention in a month?
You know, it's a great question. What I will say is I appreciate in Vice President Harris's statement that she said, I'm going to seek to earn and win the party's endorsement. So I think she takes nothing for granted.
Today, Democratic candidate for governor Bob Ferguson said he thinks Harris taking over the nomination will help Democrats running in Washington state.
Obviously, what happens nationally can have an influence on what happens more locally. But I think the main takeaway at this point is an excitement. She understands one has to earn this, and this is a big change for her to go from being vice president to potentially the nominee of the party in a critical election in a very short period of time.
In addition to the delegates and the endorsements today, Kamala Harris is also receiving a huge push of financial donations. The AP reporting that just in the 24 hours after Biden announced he was dropping out of the race, the Harris campaign raised $81 million. Reporting in Seattle, Jeremy Harris, KOMO News.
Jeremy, thank you. That brings us to our KOMO Pulse poll this evening. You can scan the QR code on screen to participate. Tonight, we're asking, do you think Kamala Harris should be the Democratic presidential nominee? And the numbers are inching up in the yeses tonight. Right now, 52% of people responding to our poll say yes, 44% say no, and 4% are unsure. Again, if you'd like to weigh in, scan that code that's on your screen. It'll take you directly to the story on KOMOnews.com.
We have work to do. We have doors to knock on. We have people to talk to. We have phone calls to make. And we have an election to win.
Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign for president has officially begun. She made her first public appearances today since President Biden ended his re-election campaign and put his support behind her. It is the latest turn in what has been an election year full of them.
For the first time in more than 5 decades, an incumbent president has dropped out of an election. Today, Biden says he promises to be out on the road for Harris. Now, dozens of Democrats on Capitol Hill and right here in our state have thrown their support behind Vice President Harris.
Vice President Kamala Harris has excited the community. She's excited the House Democratic Caucus, and she's exciting the country.
This evening, though, there are still a lot of questions about what happens next.
Tonight, we're getting the pulse of voters here in Western Washington, especially younger voters who have shown little enthusiasm when the choices were Biden and Trump. KOMO's Joel Marino is live tonight with the shakeup many sought in the status quo. Joel.
Oh, well, and going around town today, Molly and Preston, I got the sense that a lot of younger voters, they were really gritting their teeth and looking for a reset on who's going to lead this country. Harris might be the answer they were looking for to end the apathy and bring them out to the polls.
While Seattle and much of Western Washington is seen as a Democratic stronghold, many younger voters had little love over their options for president this November.
Honestly, it was the choice in the beginning between the better of two evils.
I think there was more dread before.
That changed this weekend when President Joe Biden stepped aside and handed the reins to his running mate.
I think his time has run its course, and Kamala being runner-up, amazing. I think she'll do great.
It's a lot easier to be excited about someone who, is a bit of a change.
For many, the tide began to turn during the debate between Biden and former President Donald Trump.
I mean, you can kind of see, the decline in, his cognitive abilities and stuff, and it's definitely pretty concerning.
Other younger voters felt both candidates were out of touch.
I think the age was an issue for a lot of people around my age.
The coming weeks of campaigning will be critical for Harris, especially if other top Democrats decide to challenge her.
I'm really interested in hearing what Kamala has to say, and then also Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan might be an interesting pick.
Given the late start, just more than 100 days before the election, Harris also needs to do more to define herself and be clear about the policies she'll pursue.
People want to know more about her, I think, still.
There are some policies that I am wary of, but I am more positive for her than Donald Trump returning back to office.
Well, the voters I spoke to say the coming weeks will be critical for Harris, as she'll need to tap into that groundswell of support and carry her into November. Reporting live, Joel Marino, KOMO News.
All right, Joel, thank you. Tonight, the endorsements for Vice President Harris are pouring in on social media. Let's take a look at how some of our state leaders are reacting. On X, Representative Adam Smith writes, quote, Vice President Harris has been an excellent leader over the last 3.5 years. Grateful for her work and dedication to this country. Senator Patty Murray posted saying, quote, no one can speak more powerfully about reproductive freedom, and no one can spell out the devastating consequences of Trump abortion bans more effectively than VP Kamala Harris. And Representative Pramila Jayapal posted, quote, Vice President Kamala Harris just called me and I told her I am 1,000% in for her to be our president. Democratic candidate for governor Bob Ferguson is also throwing his support behind Kamala Harris. We caught up with him today to see how he thinks this could impact the race.
So I think she takes nothing for granted. She understands one has to earn this. And this is a big change for her to go from being vice president to potentially the nominee of the party in a critical election in a very short period of time.
Coming up tonight at 6, KOMO's Jeremy Harris talks with a professor from the University of Washington about what voters should watch for in the next few weeks.
So the question now, what comes next? As soon as August 1st, Democrats plan to hold a virtual roll call to select their nominee ahead of the August 19th convention in Chicago. Then at the convention, about 4,700 Democratic delegates will choose a new candidate by a majority vote. Some 700 superdelegates can vote for whoever they please. They're allowed to vote in a second round if a candidate doesn't secure the majority needed to win the first round.